New evidence suggests Planet 9 with a 5 sigma. Watch this. Boom! 5 sigma, Planet X, the latest. Rex Bear, how the heck are you? Beautiful day out here in southern Colorado. The sun's out, blue skies. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the latest discovery suggesting a 5 sigma of Planet 9 or Planet X on the edges of our solar system. Now, we've been hearing this for years, for decades, actually. I'm going to share with you data that goes back to the late 1800s, suggesting a far out, distant planet outside of our observations. And I did want to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Noble Gold Investments. Do yourself a favor, call up Noble Gold Investments today. Find out how to convert your 401 or IRA into precious metals. You can also convert into cryptos. It's all about options. You can purchase gold and silver directly through Noble Gold Investments and have it shipped directly to your house, even if you live in the boonies. I have friends that have had gold shipped to their house in the middle of practically nowhere. So, Noble Gold, A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews. And if you look at where gold is going, oh yeah, we've recently reached all-time highs. I said at the beginning of the year, it might hit close to $2,500 or $2,500. And somebody said, no way, Rex. Well, silver, hot. There's a lot of upside with silver. Banks are still literally usurping tons of gold. So there might be some great opportunities for you, especially with all the turmoil right now. And if you don't have a 401 or IRA, no, just so you know, if you've got a 401 or IRA and you convert into precious metals, find out how to qualify to get a free 1/4 ounce solid gold coin added to your collection or to start your collection. Now, obviously, there's never any guarantees, but if you look at what the big banks and the money funders are doing right now, there is a ton of opportunity in the precious metals markets. Also, if you want to trade, like let's say that there is an SHTF scenario where you can't go to the bank and pull out money, or you can't use your debit card or your credit card, and you have to exchange. Some people like to have what I refer to as junk silver, or silver dimes that were made 90% silver about 50 or so years ago and before that, because that's a great form of exchange. So dimes and nickels and quarters of 90% silver is a great option as well. And it's always nice to stack your bank. So give them a call, 1-877-646-5347. Let them know Rex from Leak Project sent you. And if you want to get the free ebooks and know more also, you can go to leakprojectgold.com. That's leakprojectgold.com. All right, let's get into this, shall we? Hello. Beautiful day. Time to share the screen. I've got a ton of data to share with you. I'm probably going to go on for quite some time, so I'm going to upload part of this on YouTube. You can watch the full on Patreon. New evidence found for Planet 9. New evidence found for Planet 9. This is from phys.org, phys.org, a small team of planetary scientists from the California Institute of Technology, as well as the University Côte d'Azur and Southwest Research Institute, reports possible new evidence of Planet 9. Well, that possible new evidence, they suggest, is a 5 sigma. That's a pretty big deal. They've published their paper on the Arxiv. I'll share that paper with you. It has been accepted for publication in the Astrophysical Journal Letters as well. In 2015, a pair of astronomers at Caltech found several objects bunched together beyond Neptune's orbit near the edge of the solar system. This bunching, they did then theorize, was due to the pull of gravity from an unknown planet, one that later came to be called Planet 9 after, of course, they demoted Pluto, so they could then call it Planet 9 and not Planet X, so that the fear factor in the public would not be as high. Now, that's my opinion. That's obviously not proven, or is it? Okay, anyway, since that time, researchers have found more evidence of the planet. Although circumstantial in this new paper, the research team reports they describe an additional set of data points supporting the existence of the planet. The work involved tracking the movements of long-period objects that cross Neptune's orbit and also exhibit irregular movements during their journey. They use these observations to create multiple computer simulations, which each depict different situations and scenarios. In addition to factoring the impact of Neptune's gravitational pull, the team also added data which takes into account what has come to be known as the galactic tide, which is a combination of forces exerted by objects in the Milky Way that are beyond our solar system. The research team found the most plausible explanation for the behavior of the objects was interference from gravity exerted by a large distant planet. That thing must be massive because they're suggesting it's out in the Kuiper belt, and some of these trans-Neptunian objects are enormous. So imagine one planetary body that was so massive and had such a gravitational impact on its surrounding that it was causing other massive planetary bodies to bundle up and clump up together. These simulations do not allow for the research team to identify the location of the planet. Find that awfully peculiar. It then goes on to say the team acknowledges that other forces could be at play that might explain the behavior that they simulated, but they also suggest it is far less likely, and they note further evidence will become available as soon as the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile is set to begin operations sometime next year. It's going to be equipped, they note, to search in ways for a planet in a rigorous assessment that is not yet available. Wow. So, literally, let's look at what the definition 5 sigma actually means. It is a result that has a statistical significance of 5 sigma, means the almost certain likelihood that a bump in the data is caused by a new phenomenon rather than a statistical fluctuation. Scientists calculate this by measuring the signal against the expected fluctuations and the background noise across the whole range. So then if you go to MIT News, explained sigma, in most cases, a 5 sigma result is considered the gold standard for significance, corresponding to about a 1 in a million chance that the findings are just a result of random variations. A 6 sigma translates to 1 chance in a 500 million that the result is a random fluke. Wow. Well, here's the paper. Generation of low inclination Neptune crossing TNOs by planet 9. The solar system's distant reaches exhibit a wealth of anomalous dynamical structure, hinting at the presence of a yet undetected massive trans-Neptunian body, planet 9. Previous analysis have shown how orbital evolution induced by this object can explain the origins of a broad assortment of exotic orbits, ranging from those characterized by high perihelia to those with extreme inclinations. In this work, we shift the focus towards a more conventional class of TNOs and consider the observed census of long-period, nearly planar Neptune-crossing objects as a hitherto unexplored probe of the Planet 9 hypothesis. To this end, we carry out comprehensive n-body simulations that self-constantly model gravitational perturbations from all giant planets. The galactic tide, as well as passing stars stemming from initial conditions that account for the primordial giant planet migration and sun's early evolution within a star cluster. Accounting for observational biases, our result reveals that the orbital architecture of this group of objects aligns closely with the predictions of a P9 inclusive model, Planet 9. In stark contrast, the P9 free scenario is statistically rejected at a 5 sigma confidence level. Accordingly, this work introduces a new line of evidence supporting the existence of Planet 9 and further delineates a series of observational predictions poised for near-term resolution. Wow! That's incredible. So that's a pretty cool paper. I'm going to leave the link for that in the video description box. A 5 sigma, we're getting closer, folks. And Is there a significance to 2030? I don't know. Maybe that's just because of the Apophis comet that some speculate will cause Armageddon. But this is very interesting. And it's still way, way out there. Way out there. But when are we going to see it? When is it going to get closer? I've got data that suggests they found it in the 80s when observing through a infrared scope system that was launched in space. I'm going to share that data with you shortly. If they were able to observe it 40 years ago, I can assure you there's a very strong chance that they can observe it now. And if they did find it, would they tell us? Would they tell you? Would they be like, yeah, well, folks, we found it, Planet 9. You could call it Planet X. The ancients called it Nibiru. Yes, every 3,600 years, it appears that there's a major catastrophe. Would they tell us that if that was the situation, or would they leave that probably out of the public media? I would assume they would probably leave it out of the public media because they wouldn't want to frighten the masses, and they would want to be able to prepare themselves. When I am referring to they, the MFers, the money funders, those that love you so much. This is fascinating. Now, here's another article. And this is from phys.org also. Japanese astrophysics. Let me repeat that. Japanese astrophysicists suggest possibility of hidden planet in the Kuiper Belt. Whoa. A pair of astrophysicists, one with Kendai University, the other, the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan, both in Japan, have found possible evidence of an Earth-like planet residing in the Kuiper Belt. In their paper published in the Astronomical Journal, describing properties of the Kuiper Belt that they believe are consistent with the existence of a planet not much bigger than Earth. Over the past decade, several studies have led credence to theories regarding the possible existence of a planet in the far outer edges of the solar system, which has come to be known theoretically as Planet 9. In this new effort, the researchers suggest it is possible that there is a planet much closer than the Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt is a circumstellar disk composed of objects in the outer solar system, beginning just past the orbit of Neptune. Like the planets, material in the Kuiper Belt orbits the sun. Prior research has suggested that the objects in the disk are asteroids, space rocks, comets, as well as other small chunks of material, most likely made up of ice. Yeah, sure. In their work, the researchers found that some of the objects in the Kuiper Belt behave in a way that suggests there's small planets among them, one approximately 500 astronomical units from the sun. Neptune is approximately 30 astronomical units from the sun in comparison. So, let's look at the Kuiper Belt here. You can see Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, the sun, the inner asteroid belt, and then the Kuiper Belt outside of that with those blue and white specks. Just to put into perspective how massive it is and how massive these objects are outside of the known solar system. Here's another example. Like the Pluto system compared to where allegedly the Voyager is right now, it is way past that, and it's kind of on the edges of known space that we have observed allegedly. Okay, next article, Bob. Here we go. So I find this very interesting that if we go back to approximately 2003, they found this planet, a rogue planet, and then they called it a dwarf planet named IRAS or IRAS. This photo is up for debate also because I can't find the original. Now, this looks kind of like Nibiru, right? I mean, it's got wings on it. It looks like it's got this red core. And then if you read the data set, it says Ni2b, and you're like, wait a second, does that stand for Nibiru? No, that doesn't stand for Nibiru. That's some type of composition or element. But you've got the date. They found it 10/21/2003. So they title it the 2003 UB313. a lot of things change after this event. Like, for example, scholars and astronomers that are considered highly credible, at least by some in their communities, there's this gathering of astronomers together that vote on Pluto. Like, so why is it after this planet is discovered, just a couple years later, there's this huge round table where they're like, well, let's demote Pluto. Yeah, let's demote Pluto because it's not really a planet. And then other people and astronomers and people much smarter than myself that have studied space and the planets their whole life or much of their life, they're like, yes, Pluto is a planet. And just because you're demoting it doesn't mean that the planet itself is demoted. But then shortly after, then a couple of the people on that round table that helped demote Pluto, they're like, hey, we think we found Planet 9. We think we found it. Planet 9, Planet 9, Planet 9. It's out in the Kuiper Belt. We think we found it. So they demote Pluto so that they can then say, when they find another rogue planet that they want to call Planet 9, so they don't have to call it Planet X. Well, we've got our own name for it. It seems very political to me, just my opinion, and I want to get your thoughts on this. But let's take a look at this planet, this dwarf planet, they call it. So IRAS, discovered by astronomers Mike Brown, Chad Trujillo, and David Rabinowitz using the Samuel Oschin telescope at Palomar Observatory. And it's larger than Pluto. This planet has, according to this data set, 27% more massive than Pluto, and it's still a dwarf planet. Originally nicknamed Xena by the Discovery team after the television warrior, the name IRAS comes from the Greek goddess of discord and strife, which is fitting as it remains at the center of a scientific debate about the definition of a planet. They say the atmosphere is too thin to be considered a true atmosphere, primarily made of methane that sublimates from ice on the surface. Then they go on to say it appears to be covered with methane ice, 50%, while the rest of its surface would be made of a mixture of methane, nitrogen, and water ices, and ice tholin. So just keep that timing in mind. 2003, the discovery of this planet, and then 2006, they change what a planet is. When I say they, I'm referring to the astronomical body that then shares this information publicly, that is, according to the MFers, the experts, right? So then let's go to the Interface Region Imaging Spectrograph IRAS. This is an advanced imaging system launched into space to observe the stars and the planets through infrared. And this was launched in 2013. Well, guess what? Previous to that, NASA has launched other satellites with infrared capabilities, at least since the 80s. So this is an example of that type of technology. Now, you all know who Zacharias Sitchin is. You either love him or you don't. You either think he's spot on or you don't. Now, personally, I've read some of his work, and I think he has some great work, and I also think that he got some things wrong. And that's okay, because we all get things wrong. I get things wrong all the time. And I'll admit it when I do, usually. Especially if I know about it, right? I'm like, oh, look, I made a mistake. I learned from it. Now we're closer to the truth. Like, science continually rewrites itself. If science was fact, then it wouldn't be science. We wouldn't need people to do the science because we'd know everything, and we don't. So Zacharias Sitchin claims that every 3,600 years, according to some translations of tablets, ancient Sumer, there's this planetary body that shows up about every 3,600 years that can cause major strife and discord and problems and reset civilization as we know it. And in the past, there's been even more catastrophic things that have happened because of this planetary body, like the destruction of planets. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but it's fascinating. And I've studied in depth the ancient Sumerian and Akkadian and Babylonian and Greek and Roman mythologies, the native mythologies and stories from the Hopi and the Navajo. And there's a lot of dots that connect. I've studied the Gnostic texts. that were almost completely wiped out and destroyed by the money funders and those that they paid to go destroy these scriptures, right? We're lucky to have these. So there's a very strong possibility of a rogue planet. Now, whether or not the description is accurate, I don't know. I have a different interpretation on the the ME that Zacharias Sitchin has. I have a completely different interpretation, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. And it doesn't mean I'm right. So Zacharias Sitchin is a scholar, and there are people that say he had connections with the Rothschilds, and I'll share that with you in a minute, at least the data that I could find. But that doesn't mean that he's a shill. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend named Christopher OBrien that was paid by a Rockefeller to do research for several years because even he didn't know. So he was paying my friend Christopher to go find the truth. And it was in regards to these weird bolides that exploded over areas in southern Colorado, that then afterwards there were all these artifacts discovered under the explosions that weren't found outside of the explosions. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, this image could very well be doctored. The reason I'm showing this to you is because if we were made in the image, if mankind was made in the image of God or the gods, they probably made us smaller than they were. They're like, you know what? We're 10, 15 feet tall, right? We're 20 feet tall. Let's make them about 6 feet tall, 5 to 6 feet tall. What do you say? That way, if they get mad at us, we're still bigger. They still know who's boss. I mean, there's so much evidence for giants with the megaliths, the megalithic structures, the size of the doors. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of rumors about the Smithsonian covering up a lot of these larger bones that were discovered in mounds. But I wouldn't be surprised if those bones of giants that we refer to that were maybe 7 to 9 feet tall, maybe even some larger than that, those that came before them were even larger. Like they were hybrids. So this is my friend Christopher OBrien. You should read his books because they're absolutely amazing. And Christopher OBrien has been around as long as Stephen Greer and Linda Moulton Howe as far as researching this data. And in my opinion, Christopher is one of the best researchers when it comes to some of these anomalies. I mean, he even trained police officers how to do investigations when it came to this weird paranormal stuff. I think he's been to approximately 200 sites where there's been cattle mutilations. And you know what? Christopher's opinion of these cattle mutilations isn't aliens from Zeta Reticuli coming down to bathe in the flesh of a dead cow after they do laser precision mutilations. You know what I mean? He has a far different interpretation, and his, in my opinion, is much more closer to the truth. And David Rockefeller actually funded Christopher OBrien's work for a while. And Christopher OBrien shared a letter that David Rockefeller sent to him, thanking him for the work that he did. And there's such a cool story that you need to go back and listen to if you get a chance, where Christopher OBrien tells a story when he actually met David Rockefeller and what happened when he met him. It was quite funny. This is Grandpa Maleva, close friend of mine. I consider him family. He has shared so much with the world about what his ancestors have given to him, and the knowledge and the stories and the history. And he's taught us a lot. And he also talks about a nemesis returning star. And his ancestors shared this with him. He has artifacts that show these orbits and these depictions of a planet coming close to Earth and the moon, and then ripping a chunk of the moon off, and then a piece of that moon flies towards Earth. It happens 2 times. You can see he has all the data right here, showing the orbit, showing how it breaks off pieces of the moon, how it goes by 2 times. That's what the T stands for, is 2 times. And he has artifacts that have this depiction in the artifact. So his ancestors were warned, and they have passed this on through the generations. Thank you, Grandpa Maleva. Carlos Munoz Ferrada. He was a pioneer in reference to Planet X and the research of Planet X in modern times. And he had a lot to say about it. This is what Carlos has to say about Planet X. An elliptical orbit, like a comet, large mass, like a planet. It's like a planet with a tail. It approaches Earth charged with cosmic energy. It doesn't have established celestial laws, or at least it doesn't respect established celestial laws. It travels between the sun and a black sun located 32 billion kilometers away. It will pass 14 million kilometers from Earth. It will eventually enter our solar system, and we will be able to see it with the naked eye and photograph it. His arrival will bring about geophysical and human change, which will bring change and destruction. He provides us with other data in television shows and in several media. These data sets are as follows. And this is referencing what Carlos said on TV. 92 kilometers a second is the speed of the planet Hercolubus in revolving around the black sun. 76 kilometers a second is the speed of the planet Hercolubus when it revolves around the sun of our solar system that we see. 300 kilometers a second is the speed of the planet Hercubolus halfway between the two suns. It will get 14 million kilometers to Earth in a trajectory of the planet. Now, if we put that into perspective, that's not very far away because the sun we see now is 95 million miles away, 93 million miles away. So 14 million kilometers is going to be maybe 8.3, 8.5 million miles. It is going to be like 11 times closer to Earth than the sun, if this is true. Imagine a planet so close to Earth. It would be so massive, it would take up an enormous part of the sky. And what we would see are lightning bolts and electrical discharge that could wipe out entire cities. Like, think of the Grand Canyon. Think of the thunderbolt of the gods that is depicted. Imagine all of the electric discharge and all of the electrical energy that this massive planet is capturing as it's traveling through the solar system and through the universe at a speed that is described in these texts. That could have been what the ancients saw and put down in stone oftentimes. And then glorified and deified these planets and these events. I mean, if the planet comet passes 14 million kilometers from Earth, that's equivalent to 36.36 times the distance from the moon to the Earth. And this would not be enough to avoid a cataclysm. I mean, we could see lightning bolts that would stretch from that planet to possibly Earth. Imagine seeing these filaments of electricity that go from something 8 million miles away, an 8 million mile long lightning bolt. That's fascinating. That is fascinating and frightening at the same time. So this is an extract from the report sent by Carlos Munoz Verdeda to Brian Marston of the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, who's a comet specialist, Cambridge, Boston, Massachusetts, the United States. And according to this, it was a literal translation respecting the style of the author. Wow. So there's some more research for you. Now, this was the IRAS launched in 1983 that most likely observed Planet X or Planet 9 or whatever name you want to give it so you don't scare people. You could call it Smurf. You could call it Bugs Bunny. Let's call it Planet Bugs Bunny. We should call it Planet Yosemite Sam. Yeah! Or what was that character that, like, the Planet Tasmanian Devil is more likely. So this was launched in 83, an infrared astronomical satellite that most likely captured Planet X. It hit the mainstream news, and then crickets. And then, it was just, they were wrong. They calculated the data wrong. It wasn't a planet. It was swamp gas from Uranus. That's what usually happens. Well, no, folks, because I'm going to show you a paper that came out just within the past few years where they went back and looked at the data sets. We have an independent researcher that went back and looked at the data sets from the 80s, thousands of photos, and he thinks he spotted Planet X. I'm going to share that with you. So in the 1980s, NASA launched a satellite with infrared capabilities to pick up Planet X. Well, guess what? The Washington Post, front page news, all over the papers. The same year this infrared scope was launched into space. Same year, folks. Coincidence? Possibly as large as Jupiter. Front page, Washington Post, before it turned into a mouthpiece for the MFers. Well, I mean, it's always been a mouthpiece for the MFers, but anyway. They love you so much. So listen to this. The distance from Earth of a mysterious object in space was reported incorrectly in some editions yesterday. The correct figure is 50 billion miles. So there was a paper that came out before this that I need to find, and let's find out how far it was in that paper, because they probably added like an extra 20 billion miles. Like, well, that's too close. Let's change it. Let's say it was 50 billion, not 30 billion. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. This came out December 30th, 1983. A heavenly body possibly as large as the planet Jupiter, the giant planet Jupiter, possibly so close to Earth that it would be part of this solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite. They were just seeing things, folks. Don't worry. It just appeared and then it disappeared. That's what happens with massive planets. They just show up and then they're gone. So it's just, don't worry about it. So mysterious is the object that astronomers do not know if it's a planet, a giant comet, a nearby protostar that never got hot enough to become a star, a distant galaxy so young that it's still in the process of forming, its first stars, or a galaxy so shrouded in dust that none of the light cast out by its stars ever gets through. All I can tell you is that we don't know what it is, Dr. Jerry Neugebauer, IRAS chief scientist for California's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and director of the Palomar Observatory for the California Institute of Technology, said in an interview. They don't know what it is. Don't worry about it. It's all good, man. Let's just go back to work, pay our bills. All right, man. We got bills and issues here. I don't need to worry about an incoming giant planetary body the size of Jupiter. So Dr. George King, very interesting life, very interesting work, and quite fascinating. There's a lot of people that look up to him as not only a scholar, but like a prophet. And that's cool. He might be. I don't know. I haven't researched him enough. I have done a few interviews with people connected to the Aetherius Society. Very kind people that I consider knowledgeable and with, kind hearts and want to help the world. And one of the things about Dr. George King is he actually talked about another planet behind the sun that was always behind the sun, at least in our observations, so that we can't observe it with the telescope, at least on Earth. And he talked about this planet being there for souls that didn't necessarily evolve the way that they were meant to, or they had, you could call a lot of opportunities, a lot of stuff that they need to get rid of, a lot of attachments, a lot of negative energy, I guess you could say. So that's for them, for those souls. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but I find it fascinating regardless, and there might be something to it. Be prepared, not scared. Sedna, another planetary body that was discovered with these weird orbits, right? Like, look at this orbit of Sedna versus Pluto. Neptune's 30 times 93 million miles away, 30 astronomical units away. Pluto's even further out than that. Now we've got this other planet named Sedna that goes out 50 times further than that. We're discovering planetary bodies on a regular basis that have these weird elliptical orbits. And these trans-Neptunian objects are massive. And this new data suggests that these trans-Neptunian objects are being clumped together because something else is so massive that it's clumping them together. So then they try to say, oh, it's a grapefruit-sized black hole. And then people are like myself, like, okay, one day they say it's a grapefruit-sized black hole that's causing massive trans-Neptunian objects to orbit and clump together and have these weird orbits. But 2 years before that, it was a massive body of a massive planetary body. Which is it? Grapefruit black hole or planetary body? Or like the paper came out in the 80s, Washington Post, we don't know what it is. It could be a galaxy that is forming that has dust so the light doesn't come out. I mean, it could be anything, folks. I think most of these people don't know. So they're like, well, I don't know what, but there are people out there that might actually know, and they might have the data, and they might not want to share that data with the world yet, but maybe give hints, drop little hints. But if we go back 40 years ago, and let's say it was 50 million miles away, we look at the data, how much closer would it be now? Then we can look at that IRAS. Let me find this real quick also. This is the paper that does show what they think is evidence that Planet 9, Planet X, was found by the IRAS dated from the 80s. So this is the abstract. I've carried out a search for Planet 9 and the IRAS data at the distant range proposed for Planet 9. The signature would be a 60 unidentified IRAS point source with an associated nearby source from the IRAS reject file of sources, which received only a single hour's confirmed detection. The confirmed source should be detected on the first 2 HCON passes, but not on the third. While the single HCON should be detected only on the third HCON, I have examined the unidentified sources in 3 IRAS 60 catalogs. Some can be identified with 2 mass galaxies, galactic sources, or as cirrus. The remaining unidentified sources have been examined with the IRSA Scanpy tool to check for the signature of missing HCONs and for association with IRAS reject file single HCONs. No matches of interest survive. For a lower mass planet in the distant range of 200 to 400 astronomical units, we expect a pair of triplet of single HCONs with separations 2 to 35 arc-min. Several hundred candidate associations are found and have been examined with Scanpy. A single candidate for Planet 9 survives, which satisfies the requirements for detected and non-detected HCON passes. Hello, are you listening? This is amazing. A fitted orbit suggested a distance of 225 astronomical units, plus or minus 15, and a mass of 3 to 5 ME. Dynamical simulations are needed to explore whether the candidate is consistent with existing planet ephemerides. If so, a search in an annulus of radius 2.5 to 4, centered on the 1983 position at visible and near infrared wavelengths, would be worthwhile. And no, that is not the devil's sixth sign. I just get excited and I'm like, okay, man, this is awesome. So don't get all freaked out, man. It's called body language. Like some people just talk like this. And they're like, and then on the planets and satellites, terrestrial planets, minor planets, asteroids, general, infrared, general. I have a tough time doing that. I like to share with the world my excitement. It's pretty cool. And I want to show you the image because the image is in here of Planet 9. This is it. Boom, right here. This is the planet, or what he believes is Planet 9, that does fit the criteria for Planet X that was then all over the news, and then it disappeared, and then they said it was swamp gas from Uranus. Here it is. Here's the orbit from 1983. This is where it is now. Well, actually, it'd probably be right around here. Check us out over on Patreon. You can watch the rest of this and thousands of hours of unedited, uncensored content for only $1. Be excellent to each other, everybody. I really appreciate your support. Hit that bell for all notifications. So hit the bell, be well, be excellent to each other, and be the change you want to see. And I'll see you on Patreon.